CEO of the Greater Women's Business Council, and I will also be your moderator this morning for our general panel discussion. And so we want to welcome you to the Power of Partnering Marketplace that we will host quarterly to give you more opportunity to be engaged with the Greater Women's Business Council. So we are looking forward to you enjoying this morning. We hope you've had a good start to your week and that you're going to gain insights into our topic today that we know is very relevant, cybersecurity, and more importantly, are you as a WBE ready to do business with corporate America? So first, we want to commend all of you for being here today, and we hope that 2021 is a transformation year for your company to reform, be resilient, and most importantly, to reimagine how great you all can be. So before we get started, we ask that you mute your mics, as this will assist us in hearing every word from our guest panelists today. And we are about to begin, so hopefully you have your coffee, your tea, or your smoothie, and enjoyed a delicious breakfast made especially for you by you. And please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And we hope that you continue to let us know how you're doing. So June is a month of celebrations, and that included Father's Day, Juneteenth Day, Hug Holiday. So give yourselves a hug. And today is World Social Media Day. So we encourage you to tweet and Facebook about our event with the hashtag GWBC Live. So we have some awesome women businesses at GWBC and fantastic corporations that understand the value of connecting and contracting with our women businesses. And so we also have awesome leadership in our board of directors. And leading our board this year is Dr. Lisa Miller, Senior Vice President, Chief Supplier Diversity Officer at Truist, who will now bring you greetings.
Good morning. Hello, everyone. On behalf of the Board of Directors, we are very excited to join you this morning and share information about an important subject that Raj just mentioned, cybersecurity. Very, very important in this day and time, especially with the recent ransomware activities that have been going on in this nation. So it's important for all of you to have a business plan as well, and we'll be talking about that. But before we start, wanted to make sure that we thank Equifax and the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta for participating as our guest panelists during our general session. The PART Marketplace is another opportunity for the board to see the mission of the organization in action. And as you may know, we have modified this event to a quarterly timeline to bring you more opportunities to grow your business. Now, we have several board members who are attending this event with us today. So board members, if you can show your hands for all of our attendees to see you, that would be wonderful. Hello, hello. So glad you've joined us today. So we hope that you will enjoy today's general session along with the other activities that are scheduled. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for giving me the privilege to serve as your GWBC Chair of the Board. Have a great day and enjoy the sessions.
Thank you, Lisa. So we appreciate your leadership as well and support. And as a part of the mission of GWBC, provide educational resources, of course, and opportunities to build relationships. So we also want to thank our sponsors who also assist us in supporting this organization as well. So keep that in mind, that our sponsors are, as I call, the wind beneath our wings, in order to ensure that we have programming and events for you just as this one, The Power of Partnering Marketplace. So today we have a great general session for you with our fantastic panelists from Equifax and the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. And several of our women businesses have been selected to participate in our matchmaker session that is scheduled later this morning. Here at GWBC, did you know that we have 1,100 certified women businesses whose revenues total 8.5 billion and that they employ over 58,000 in our 3 states of Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina that we serve? And speaking of our topic, cybersecurity, and are you ready to contract with the Fortune 500? Let's talk about a couple of recent headliners. The Cybersecurity 202, the United States, is still #1 in cyber capabilities, and that is an article in the Washington Post. And then let's talk about returning to the office. Cybersecurity experts seeing more malware on devices of employees, and that is from Como News. Third, employees fail to engage with cybersecurity issues, and that's with Tech Radar. So is this our next normal? Well, let's find out from our panelists who will share with us about what you can do to incorporate cybersecurity protection for your business and make your company more competitive in the marketplace, because most corporations are going to be looking for all of this from their suppliers. So please welcome Ashley Korte. She is the Senior Director, Global Crisis Management at Equifax. She leads the Global Crisis Management Program with responsibility for 12 crisis action teams spanning across 24 countries. My goodness, does she know which time zone she's in at times? She also sees the Emergency Response Management Program designed to protect the health and safety of 11,000 employees worldwide. She is tasked with developing and overseeing the crisis response strategies and ensuring the enterprise is adequately prepared to respond to crises. And her program is responsible for the development and facilitation of annual tabletop exercises with all regional crisis action teams, including the Equifax Senior Leadership Team and the Board of Directors. And prior to joining Equifax, her career was focused on relationship management and program implementation. And Ashley's ability to dissect and rebuild programs has led her to success within her current role at Equifax. She played an instrumental role both strategically and operationally in Equifax COVID-19 pandemic response. And she is actively involved in the development of global security's newest initiatives. I like this one, WAVES, Women Advancing Visions at Equifax Security. And she holds a Bachelor of Science degree in psychology from Kennesaw State University. Please welcome Ashley.
Thank you. I appreciate that warm introduction. I'm happy to be here. Would you like me to go ahead and jump into my presentation?
Yes.
Or? Okay. Sure thing. So once again, happy to be here. I really enjoy participating in conversations such as this. I think that it's just a great opportunity, not only to, hopefully add value, but at the same time, learn from everyone. I think that I have as much to learn from you all as I can offer. So with that, we can go ahead and jump in. What I'm going to do for this segment is give you a high-level overview of Equifax as an organization, the program that I oversee, really the fundamentals of our program, and then we can shift into the next slide, or the next section. So we can go ahead and go to that next slide. But what is Equifax, or who is Equifax? It's a question that we get a lot. I think for the most part, we're associated with being a credit reporting agency, but it expands way beyond that. So we are a data and technology company. We were founded 122 years ago here in Atlanta, where we still remain headquartered. And we've grown over the last 122 years, now operating in 24 countries with 11,000 employees, and we continue to grow. But from the most simplistic way to describe what we do, businesses leverage the data and analytics and technology that we use to drive their decision-making processes. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. So, crisis management, where do we fit in? Why do we have a crisis management program here? What is crisis management to Equifax? I think that's important to call out because it's going to be different from each organization. It should be based around the needs of your business. And so for us, if I had to sum up our program in one word, it is preparedness. Everything we do is to ensure that we build this muscle memory and that it just becomes second nature to us. So in the event there is a crisis, we are ready to respond, and our response is quick, it is efficient, it is effective, and then that shifts into our ability to recover quickly. There are so many businesses and consumers that rely on us to be able to remain operational. So we developed this framework that we call the 5 C's of crisis management here at Equifax, and they really embody what we represent, starting first and foremost with culture. You will probably hear me talk about culture 500 times today. It is something that is so ingrained in us, but it's important to us because we believe that there's the technical piece to cybersecurity, yes, and there's the controls and the mechanisms, but all of those don't really work, or they're not going to work to the best of their ability if you don't have the right culture and the right mindset within your organization. So I came in, and my job is essentially to help drive that culture, making sure that we have this security first mindset. It is everybody's job. So it doesn't just sit within the security team where I sit. We sit within global security. It goes way beyond that. It's every single employee that walks through our doors, that logs on to one of our devices, that it is your responsibility and you are held accountable for ensuring that you have a security first mindset and you protect the assets that you have access to. And we achieve that through transparent communication. We are big on communication, whether it be internally or externally. Without that, there's a breakdown in the process. There's a breakdown in the culture. And so, we want to be proactive. We also want to be receptive, that if we're not doing something well, let us know that so that we can pivot, because, working in the world of crises, it's ever changing. And so you're never going to have one set structure of how you manage. The next piece is really big for me, collaboration. And it's also what kind of sparked my interest in speaking here today, is I love sharing resources. I am big on that, just because of your title doesn't mean you have all the right answers, right? So Equifax, 11,000 employees on a global scale. We have so much talent. And I think it's very important for us to just take that deep dive and see what other people know. You're going to find a lot of people that have great insight and suggestions that will help us enhance, existing procedures. And it really creates this sense of cohesion amongst the teams, which drives, one of our biggest sayings here that we say a lot is that we are one Equifax, we're one team. That is how we operate, and that is our mindset. And it's a great environment to be a part of, because regardless of the business unit that you're working with, or the center of excellence, that you can rely on each team member. They're going to be there for you, and there's never any shaming, right? If you don't understand a certain aspect of what they do, because we work in a technical world, it can be very complex at times. So just making sure that you build this culture where security is at the top of your mind, you're communicating with each other, but you're also collaborating with each other. And then the last two is just consistency and commitment. We have those because it's important to our employees and our customers and our shareholders that we have established processes and we have procedures that we run, that we are here to support you, And that helps provide a sense of stability, which employees need, because there's a big human element to managing crises. It's not just the technical aspect of, what happened and the financials. It's the people that you're working with and that work for the company. They're the lifeline of our company. And so we have to make sure that we have their trust and that they know that we are here to support them and provide them what they need. And the same thing with our customers. And then just committing to that program. And that's not to be confused with not keeping an open mind. That at some point you're going to have to adapt, because every crisis is going to be different and you can't run that same method. You need to have that structure in place so that you know who to contact and who the key people are, who's going to make that decision, who can access, from the technical side, but from legal, who can you pull in? You need to know all of those things, but you also need to be able to adapt. We learned that firsthand when COVID-19 hit last year. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. So the next piece of really what drives us is our guiding principles. And we believe that, they're critical to how you make your decisions, understanding what your core values are, and then mapping that out. And it helps drive that long-term impact within your company. It helps build that culture. Again, these are the 4 guiding principles that we utilize here at Crisis Management. And just to kind of put them into a more real-world example, last year it was late February, early March, when we had to ramp up our task force because we realized, this is getting really serious. I think a lot of us were kind of hoping that it wasn't what they were saying it was going to be. And with that, the first thing that came to our mind was, well, we have to ensure the safety and security of our people. But how do we do that when we have legal and regulatory requirements that we have to abide by? And we also have to consider our customers and our clients. They have to have that sense of security that if we're moving our employees to a remote working environment, how can we ensure them that their data is safe? How do we make sure that they are comfortable with the controls that we're putting in place? And then all the while in the back of your mind, you're thinking of your shareholders, right? The people that are investing in your organization, making sure that we are going to remain operational. And luckily, we were able to do that. It was a great pivot, and we were very successful in that. We're very fortunate for that. But I think a lot of that is owed to just this element of preparedness with us and the number of exercises that we conduct on a regular basis to ensure each team knows what to do, they know what their role is and how to execute that. We can go to the next slide. And that leads us here to, once again, why I'm here today, and it also ties into the collaboration piece of our framework, strategic partnership. We, as an organization, believe that it is so important to partner internally and externally with our customers, with our industry peers. There's so much information out there that you can learn, and it's also taking a little bit of just being humble that our process might not always be the best process, and there are people out there that we can learn from, and vice versa. There's something that I may have implemented here that would work great at another organization. So it's really just having these forward-thinking dialogues where we can have an open conversation. We can talk about what is working well, what's not working well, and then just be aligned and establish this sense of uniform preparedness. And I think if we're able to do that and we're able to help in that way, even if it's just 1 or 2 companies, we're doing our part and working together with everyone else. As our quote right here from our CEO, Mark, states that we don't believe that security in itself and what we do here at Equifax should be a trade secret. If we know how to protect our data and our business and our reputation, why not share that with other organizations that are trying to do the same? Because we're all on the same side at the end of the day. So that is Equifax and crisis management in a nutshell.
Thank you, Ashley. I
You're
tell you,
welcome.
the things I heard from you were, the fact of, one, that we operate as one, the guiding principles that you have, and the preparedness. And you're right, those are all the things that are key to the success of any organization, to do the very best that they can, especially in this world that we're living in today. So I appreciate you giving us that overview. Our next panelist is Ria Aiken, and she's the Director of Business Information Security Operations and Third-Party Risk Management at the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. And as a career shifter, Ria leverages 20 plus years of strategic planning, profit and loss management, and change management in the crisis management and resilience space to partner with information and security teams and business partners in developing and implementing technology and security strategies that enable business priorities while mitigating risk. And she joined the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta recently in June of 2019. And so prior to working for the FRBA, Ria served 3.5 years as a member of the City of Atlanta's Mayor's Cabinet as the first ever appointed director of the Mayor's Office of Crisis Management and Emergency Preparedness for the city, which was needed, coordinating overall preparedness, mitigation, and resilience strategies for departments with a $6 billion capital program budget, $600 million operating budget, and leading through large-scale infrastructure incidents, including the city's 2018 ransomware attack. So it was good that she was there. And prior to joining the City of Atlanta, Ria was a vice president for Weston Solutions Incorporated, where she provided regional strategic direction and leadership for operations across 6 states and Europe with a national and international client base. She is passionate about ensuring the next generation of business and technology leaders are well equipped to address the evolving risks associated with information security. So Ria currently serves as a guest lecturer for Carnegie Mellon Heinz College of Information Systems and Public Policy, and is a member of the Georgia State University Evidence-Based Cybersecurity Institute Advisory Board. And she has a Bachelor of Science from the University of Texas, San Antonio, an MBA from Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University, and a Chief Information Security Officer certificate from Carnegie Mellon University. Please welcome Ria.
Well, good morning, everyone. First and foremost, I'm just absolutely humbled to be here with all of you today, and also to represent the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. As was shared in the opening comments, I've only been with the bank for a couple of years. And before I share a little bit about who we are as an organization, would like to share a little bit about, even though I know that was quite a lengthy introduction about myself, about the journey and why I felt I really wanted to work with cybersecurity teams with this growing and evolving risk to businesses, organizations, and cities. So because of the fact that I spent so many years in the private sector, a big part of my role within the organization, quite frankly, which for many of you from a business owner perspective, or no matter what your role is in your organization, it was probably to drive and improve the bottom line. Literally, how much revenue are we going to bring in? How much are we going to bring from a profitability perspective? And how are we going to do so as we're mitigating risk? Well, on the technical side of working with my company for so long, it was in the crisis space. And so as a P&L owner, profit and loss owner in the regions that I oversaw, it was really the fact that going into large communities that were unfortunately decimated by either natural or man-made disasters all over the world, that my focus was to ensure that those communities were able to move through those disasters and hopefully build the infrastructure for long-term recovery. But on the flip side, I was also responsible for the revenue that was generated from those types of incidents to maintain the business model that I was actually responsible for. And so you might ask, well, wait a minute, is that a conflict of interest and so on and so forth? Well, the reality is that's the nature of business. And so as a business owner, you know, and I consider myself a business owner as part of the company and the region that I manage, I had to make sure that I was making good decisions on behalf of the employees, on behalf as an employee-owned company, on behalf of our stakeholders. But on the flip side, going into communities on really a day-to-day basis, depending on the incidents, and being there long-term and seeing not only what the community infrastructures were struggling and the strategies that they were trying to implement for long-term resiliency, but then even more so to recognize that after many, many disasters, a lot of focus was on the natural disasters, but now statistics suggest that over 40% of small businesses, maybe even higher, in some instances it says 60%, have to close their doors after a cybersecurity incident. I told myself, after watching all of this devastation over 20 years, how could I actually leverage my skill set on the front side to help businesses, cities, the city of Atlanta, make better business decisions, risk decisions, so that when an incident happens, because we all recognize they will happen, that we are as well prepared to navigate through that and make sure that we're in a position to thrive moving forward. And so that unconventional journey did lead me to the city of Atlanta. And so many of you may remember in 2014, or some of you may even remember in 2011, I moved here in 2009. In 2011, there was a pretty significant snowstorm, but in 2014, the city of Atlanta was on global news because of an ice storm that we experienced, and more importantly, our challenges of being able to navigate that from a Metro Atlanta perspective to make sure that the city was where it needed to be to move forward. A lot of things happened that came out of that, and as part of that after action review, it was recommended that the city bring in someone that was thinking about those things 24/7. Yeah, it really was 24/7. And thinking about how could we holistically think about how we were running as, and I often say a city is a business. So running the business of a city in support of the communities that we serve. Well, I had no idea that as we were coming in, working as a team to identify the top shocks and stressors for a city, the 3 or 4 that we identified in 2015, 2016 were infrastructure failure, natural disasters, cybersecurity, and domestic terrorism. Those were the 4 things that we had identified that we felt would be the most significant stressors to our community. Well, from 2015 until 2019, when I left the city of Atlanta, we had some hurricane impacts that came through. We had a bridge collapse that essentially disrupted the way that we navigate through a city. And then, as we all spoke to, and that was introduced, and I'm sure many are familiar with, in 2018, we had the largest at the time ransomware attack targeting a municipality. So, oh my goodness, all of those risks were realized, with the exception of domestic terrorism. All of those risks were realized within the city of Atlanta framework. Never imagined that I would be in my lifetime experiencing and navigating that in one location. And it was through that experience that I asked myself, well, what could I do? What could I do professionally to help influence change with what we are increasingly seeing? And this is not to suggest that climate change is not at the same level of risk as it relates to cybersecurity, but we're also identifying very, it's not even, we're not identifying, it has been shared that cybersecurity risk and data risk is probably the highest risk to any organization, including cities, nonprofit, universities, and everything else. So I said, well, you know what? I'm at a point where I recognize that I may not know everything in the context of technology. And actually, I'm going to tell you, a lot of the responses that we'll speak to today are through the lens of someone, as I suggested, as a business owner in my mind, and how I work with partners across the organization to think about how do we protect our assets? How do we make sure that we as a cybersecurity team are helping ensure that we're driving and accelerating the business needs? So although there's some technical questions that I'll be able to answer in many capacities, they will be through the lens of a business owner perspective. So how did I get to the Fed? So when I had that realization, as I'm sure many of you as entrepreneurs had for yourselves, that you wanted to start a small business or you wanted to work with different companies, that I thought I could help on the front end and hopefully mitigate a large crisis, I asked myself, where could I make the biggest impact? And that impact was with cybersecurity teams directly, bringing it from a business lens. And so I had the fortunate experience to work with some folks at the Federal Reserve of Atlanta, and an opportunity came up where they were exactly looking for that. With the evolution of cybersecurity, the proliferation of technology and movement to the cloud and everything else, and of course of who we are as an organization, which I'll get to in just a moment, how could we make sure that we were breaking down those silos? How could we make sure that we were translating the importance of cybersecurity and cybersecurity risks, not only to our internal partners and business owners, as I call them, but also to help them as we start to build relationships with small business owners and other partners outside of our entity. So who are we? So the Federal Reserve overall as a system, and I got to tell you, after 2 years, I'm still learning something new every single day, and I'm absolutely blown away. But in simple terms, you know, we were developed by an act of Congress in 1913. The Federal Reserve System, I think most everyone knows, is the central bank of the United States, really focused on monetary policy, but we also have direct responsibility as a results to supervisory and risk of banks within the industry or within the US, and of course, banks that actually have locations internationally within the US. We also are responsible for ensuring and working on the retail payments system. So of course, all the transactions that are going through, I'm sure you may remember when there were checks that were being written and they had to be able to be validated with banks across the nation before 9/11. Well, the Fed was an integral part of how do we make sure that we're navigating and validating those checks and that they're being cleared. But through the automated clearinghouse and partnership with them as well, we are responsible for all of ensuring those retail payments systems are protected and in place and are working for our economy and for our organizations and banks that we serve. But here's the one thing, and one of the reasons why I was so excited to participate here today. One of the things that I didn't realize that we as a bank really focus on across the system is the community and economic mobility aspects in each of the communities that we serve. So you heard that I'm with the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. We actually have 12 districts, and it's specifically designed in that capacity. The 12 districts are nonprofit entities, and our primary focus is to not only think strategically about how we're supporting each other in the Federal Reserve System to support all the communities within the US, but the other unique aspect of what we do is inclusive of everything that we're doing in support of the monetary policy and as well as the banks in support of those in our particular area, but we also tie that to how does that impact the communities that we serve? How are the decisions that are being made? What are we doing on the ground? How do we understand what's going on within the communities with small businesses and everything else? And how does that influence the way that we work and support our businesses and our communities as well? I had no idea that we brought that holistic synergy and approach to all the work that we do until I came to the Federal Reserve. And so for many of you that, depending on your view of what the Federal Reserve does and how it is that it governs and what it is that it is intended to support, one of the things that I am particularly proud of, and if anyone, you go to Federal Reserve org, you actually can go to the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. It'll give you all the overview of what we do, but it's that connection. It's connecting with organizations like GWBC to ensure that we're understanding, we're listening to what's important, the needs for the businesses that are in our community, and that we're partnering with you to ensure that we are putting things in place to help you thrive and grow, because ultimately that is going to be the foundation for continuing the success of the 95% of our economy is driven by small businesses. And so how does that come back to cybersecurity? Well, in my role and from a Federal Reserve perspective, well, obviously being the central bank of the United States, we have to ensure that our infrastructure is protected at the highest level. It's not only from a brand perspective, it's not only from a reputational perspective or operational risk, but even just the simple highlights of all the things that I mentioned that we do, we have to ensure that we have all those systems and protections in place, not only to protect the work and the institutions that we support, but also to ensure that we're connecting that for the businesses and the communities that we serve. So thank you so much for inviting me here today. And I have a lot of resources that I'll be sharing with the team to be able to share with all of you as we go through our conversations. And Roz, I'll turn it back to you.
All right, thank you, Ria. Wow, I tell you, you're talking about your perfect storms, that, just as you mentioned in one city, and although we crossed the span of Georgia, North and South Carolina, you're absolutely right. The snowstorm, then the cybersecurity issues, and the bridge, that alone would give me pause and say, I need to go on a sabbatical, right? Because that's a lot, to manage and take care of. So thank you so much for giving us that overview too and insight. And so I want to share with the audience our format today. And so just keep in mind that I am going to start out with a few thought starter questions for our special guests. And if you have questions, please use our chat section to list your questions. So our goal is hopefully to present all of them if we have time permits. And if not, we will go ahead and try to get those answers for you as well from our guest panelists. So let's get right to it. And let's start with Ashley of Equifax. One of the questions that I have for you is, in defining cybersecurity, what is the difference between a threat, vulnerability, and risk?
Okay, sure. So simple terms, a threat is really anything, incident, event that has the potential to damage an asset, your business, a system. And then a vulnerability it's a known weakness that a threat actor could potentially exploit. And where risk ties into both of those, it's really that the potential for loss when that threat exploits that vulnerability. So in cybersecurity terms, right, you've got an attacker who goes after a known vulnerability, whether you have an open port or you haven't patched the system, they exploit that vulnerability, and now it moves into the risk, and you're having to assess, what your potential loss is from this incident.
Yeah, okay, all right. And I think it's important that we understand and know those differences in order to be able to prepare, is what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Good, good. All right, Ria, how can businesses create long-term resiliency to minimize potential cybersecurity risk?
Yeah, great question. I think, quite frankly, one of the first steps is all of you being here today, right? So taking the time to even understand the approach of what you could do or what you may need to do. And the reality is, and I'm again going to speak more to the context of small businesses, and simply because of really just the nature of how many are truly impacted. Knowing that every single day that you're thinking about, more than anything, how to bring in revenue in the door. How am I going to pay my payroll? How am I going to make sure that my what am I thinking? My cash flow is where it needs to be. You may be asking yourself, well, what am I thinking? Why should I even care about cybersecurity? So when you think about long-term resilience and preparing for it, one of the first steps I would suggest is just making sure that you have the basic fundamental knowledge of understanding what cybersecurity means and what it can mean to your business. And one of the first steps to be able to do that is to conduct a risk assessment to understand your risk posture, to understand, the implications of some of the decisions that you need to make, to understand the assets that you have within your framework, and more importantly, to understand if any of those things were impacted, how would it impact your ability to do business? And so I'll stop there, but I did want to just say this at this point, because I really want to talk a lot about free resources and things like that. If for some reason you're asking yourself, what do you mean long-term resilience? Well, long-term resilience in the effect of if you are impacted by a cybersecurity incident, because the reality is, as a small business, you most likely may be one of the initial targets to infiltrating a larger business because of the vulnerabilities that could be there. It's just making sure at the first step is just understanding your risk posture, and there are free frameworks from the Small Business Administration that you can conduct a non-technical risk assessment of what's going on within your business. There's also things from the FCC that you can also do. Oops, I forgot acronyms, sorry. And then thirdly, the NIST, which is all my acronyms are falling out of my name. Ashley, NIST, Natural Institute of Standards and Technology. Yes. So there's NIST, where they also have free resources as well that can help you understand your risk posture, and then you can start to build an understanding of what your risks are, what you need to invest in, and then put the steps in place to make sure that you're as protected as possible. Thank you.
Wow. I tell you, again, and I'm glad you referred to the SBA, the Small Business Administration, as well as the FCC, the Federal Communications. So I'm glad you referred to those, as there is a wealth of information out there as well that people can access. So Ashley, it appears that almost every day right now, of course, in the news, we're talking about cybersecurity attacks. So are there other threats that small businesses should know about in order to protect their companies?
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on that this is constantly in the news. Cyber attack here, it's over there, and it's on a global scale. It's not just here in the U.S., and it's increased exponentially throughout the pandemic. I think you touched on that earlier when it came to people returning back to the office and having more malware installed on their devices. So are there other threats? Yes, there's always going to be threats. I sit in this world of security, so the first place mind goes is physical security threats to your organization. In a way, those are intentional, right? Something happens there, whether it be workplace violence or having just somebody that shouldn't be in your location, and making sure you have those appropriate controls in place. But I really feel the biggest threat to any business, the small business to the Fortune 500, is cybersecurity attacks. It's not going anywhere. It's only advancing. They're funded by nation state, and it's very sophisticated in how they operate. They're really truly these cyber organizations, and everybody is a target. So I think it's a matter of understanding that regardless of the size of your business, you need to have this first level of education. And, and Ria spoke on that about this is the first step, right? Joining forums like this and having a discussion so that you can see what other organizations are doing and just truly taking in how important it is to protect your business. But, I say that cybersecurity threats are the biggest ones because it's an intentional act. You have attackers who are targeting your business because you have something they want, whether you realize that or not. It could be financial information or personal information. They're going to try and find a way to get into your bank account or whatever the case may be, and then either use that for themselves or sell it on the dark web. It is truly this underground business that they're running, and it's very sophisticated. So having those tools and that knowledge and on how to protect yourself, I would say it's going to start with education, educating yourselves, educating your employees on what steps that you can take to stay away from the common attack vectors that they have. A lot of the time, I think when we have these discussions and you read about this ransomware attack over here, the assumption is that it was highly complex and it was extremely technical, right? And they're doing these amazing things. And then when you dig into it, it's pretty simple. It was a password that wasn't complex, or there was, something that wasn't patched, or somebody left a port open and they were able to scan and get in. It's the little things that should be in place that if you step out of that security first mindset, and it's not always top of mind, it's their way in. So I think education is key about phishing attacks. One of the most common vectors for an attacker to come in. Social engineering, learning how to pick up on those signs, because they're very good. I've listened to a few different people speak, as well as just what's available on YouTube, and listening to these people who do social engineering just to help the businesses. And it's amazing. You like to think that if somebody called me right now and said they were from the IT desk, they'd be like, why are you calling me? And I would kind of know not to give into that and give my password and all of that. But it's surprising how many people will still fall from that. And I think it's just a lack of awareness and training.
Wow. You mentioned that. I know we experience it at GWBC. I will have my team said, Roz, you just sent me this email, asking me, to charge $4,000, on this account. And I said, well, I didn't send it to you. It's like, because one, you don't have a credit card, so you're not going to be able to do that, and two, to look at the email address. And 9 times out of 10, it is not my email address, even though it will say Roz Lewis, and I get them myself, to my own self, asking me to do things, which is quite interesting. So I agree with you. It is putting those plans in place, especially with your teams, to make them aware of what you need to focus on, and let your spidey antennas go up on some of this, to let you know that, wow, this looks rather suspicious. So I don't think I'm going to do this. And of course, on your phone, texting now, there's so many ways, that they're trying to get in. So yes, I agree. It's knowledge is queen in our world. So I'm going to say that. And hopefully, we are going to have, more astute businesses understanding what they need to do. So Ria, most small businesses, they're already cash strapped, right? It's one thing, cash is queen for us. And how should they prioritize cybersecurity? And what are the vulnerable signs that they are a potential target? Can their lack of cybersecurity knowledge even affect the decision to do business with them? So I know that's a packed question, but hopefully you can share some information.
Thank you. This was actually my favorite question. I'm just going to say.
Okay.
So, and I know when I mentioned it, there's about 43% of cyber attacks specifically target small businesses. And then what I didn't share though is that the recovery from that on average is between $185,000 to $200,000 for a small business. And so, yeah. And so Roz, you actually asked, cash strap. The other part of that to me, when I read it, was it's not only cash strapped, it's resources, like resources in the context of having the technical resources that understand, but then the other part of that is time. Right? Because when you're operating a small business or you're even just launching your new business, you are wearing multiple hats. And so how do you even understand and carve out the time to decide whether or not how you focus your investment strategies as it relates to cybersecurity as well? So Ashley touched on something around the social engineering piece, which is historically, especially for small businesses, is most likely one of the top 2 risks for a small business. And then the other aspect of that, the other part of that is also malware as well. And so most large firms that are partnering with small businesses now are actually requiring or asking small businesses to understand, well, first of all, number one, they have a minimal standard of what their cybersecurity programs look like. And many of you are probably familiar, especially if you're bidding on contracts or looking at RFPs, there was a time, depending on the nature of your business, that you were looking at bonding. You had to have a minimal amount of bonding, you had to have a minimal amount of this, a minimum amount of insurance, liability insurance, and so on and so forth. Well, now you're starting to see more and more and more in the RFPs that you have to be able to demonstrate a minimal security posture to be able to conduct business with these organizations. And I'm actually going to call somebody out. She sent me a private message right here. I won't actually say her name, but somebody is doing business here on this call with the Federal Reserve, not only in San Francisco, but here in Atlanta as well. And what she shared with me is that what she recognized was, as she was going through the RFP process with the Federal Reserve, the prioritization around the security posture of the company was one of the things that she was asked about, to be able to demonstrate what the risk profile would look like. Of course, I'm sure we provided a risk analysis to the entity that was working with them. But what that ended up doing was the folks that she was working with asked her company, well, what are you doing to ensure that you have these security measures in place, or these are the risks that we've identified? Please tell us what you're doing to mitigate them. I'm happy to hear that she and they rather were rather successful. So they are doing work with us, which I think is pretty awesome. So to lend itself from a cybersecurity knowledge, and I'm going to go back to the vulnerability signs, but I want to touch on here just because I thought that was a pretty neat and cool real life example of something that just came in. Can the lack of cybersecurity knowledge affect the decision of doing business? And I think it depends. I think it depends on the organization that you are going to be working with. However, I'm not even sure it's about the lack of cybersecurity knowledge. I think what's most important, though, is as companies, and especially larger companies, are definitely driving in our environment to work with small businesses, they are asking and expecting small businesses to have a basic fundamental understanding of the security posture within their business. And so it's not necessarily security knowledge, but it's at the ability to understand whether or not, or to even be able to share and demonstrate that you do have a security program in place. And if you don't, what you're going to do to put something in place to be able to provide the minimum basic fundamentals that the company is asking you to put in place to work with them. And then at the end of the day, most companies are going to be very frank about whether or not they're going to do business with you based on the program that you have in place. One other thing I want to say, I know I'm a little long-winded, but passion is overtaking me. So I did a lot of work with the Department of Defense for the first 20 years of the work that I did. So Department of Defense, State Department, globally. And so recently, I think most people are familiar with in 2019, these years are blending together for me, or 2020, the Department of Defense put in place what they're calling, it's called a CMMI, and I apologize, that's one I can't recall, but it's a new program, and the essential aspects of it are that for any supplier who wants to do business with the Department of Defense, you will be responsible for not only demonstrating that you have a security program that meets the standard of working with the Department of Defense, but also are consenting, and that they will have a third-party audit, an entity to be able to validate the program that you have in place to work with the Department of Defense. Now, although with the greatest intentions, especially because of all the work that's being done globally, what was probably a little short-sighted, or I'm sorry, let me say it a little differently. As they were really trying to push this program out, understandably so, there was a realization that this was going to add additional cost and resources and everything else to small businesses that they simply couldn't afford. And so form an end that to the federal government and even major corporations that has specific goals of working with small businesses. Yes, we want to make sure that we're protecting our infrastructure, but are we actually, by putting these programs and regulations in place, are we actually, what's the word I'm looking for?
Supporting?
Oh, goodness. Disqualifying. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Are we even disqualifying small businesses from being able to bid? Yeah, before they even get there, because of such a strong and very comprehensive program. So what they decided to do is make sure they kind of pulled everything back, was to make sure that they put programs in place to help them put in a phased approach so that they wouldn't be disqualified from even submitting to an RFP. So lack of knowledge, I think it depends, but the reality is more and more businesses have an expectation that the partners that they're working with have a basic security program in place to be able to do business with them. And the vulnerable signs that come to play, and I'll say this in 5 specific ways. The first one is apathy. I mean, if we don't do anything, right, then and in the context of, you know, we just ignore it, or we know something might be happening, well, honestly, that's a vulnerability. I mean, it's a reality. The other aspect of that, though, is things like not having a backup plan. You know, where is your data going? Is it off-site? Is it going off to the cloud? Not having a backup plan. Things as simple, and Ashley spoke to this, and actually, Raj, you spoke to this from a personal level and within the organization. Making sure that everyone understands the policies around what password policies and things like that. The easiest way to infiltrate an organization really is through phishing, and small businesses. Some of the research that I've seen is that when targeting small businesses, the bad actors are tapping into those infrastructures really by stealing credentials. And so if you're one of those people, and I know some of you are out there because I was one of them, that, oh, I'm going to use the same password for everything from personal to professional and everything else. No, ma'am, and sirs, but no. Making sure that your passwords are as comprehensive as possible, that you change them up and everything else. And then also, where possible, even putting some things like 2-factor authentication and validation as well. And then what was the last thing? Keep your devices updated. We all know, I know you do, you get those little alerts, right? Even in this, for those of you that don't even have internal technical teams, you're getting alerts from Microsoft and others and your systems that are saying you need to upgrade. Well, we talked about one of the biggest challenges, not only just financial resources, but time. Always make the time to make sure that your devices are updated. Do not press the ignore. Do not press check back with me in a week. I know we all like to do that. Those are some of the simple things that really come to light as it relates from a vulnerability perspective, and then some of the basic mitigation strategies to essentially put yourself in a better posture. Thank you, Roz. Roz, we can't hear you.
Sorry about that. I'm just talking away because a train was going by and I didn't want you all to hear that. And it's always the engine that's the loudest, right? So I was trying to be on top of that. But no, thank you. I was saying apathy, backup plan, changing passwords, not using the same password for everything, you know, a 2-point authentication, you know, if necessary, you know, for that. And I think, you know, we had a show of hands of how many people ignored that first notice of saying update, 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 you know, and it's like, okay, I'll get to it. I'll get to it. But no, you know, these are all good, you know, points that were being made that hopefully that we're really paying attention to. So Ashley, you know, what are companies such as Equifax now requiring of their employees, right, and suppliers regarding cybersecurity to mitigate risk? You know, and can you share, if possible, some key protocols? I love the fact of your CEO's quote of saying that, you know, this type of protection should not be a trade secret, right? So when I saw that, I was like, yay, this question is appropriate, and hopefully she can share some things with us.
Sure. No, I think it's a great question, and it's something that we get a lot, right? As companies, more and more companies want to do business with us, but the landscape is shifting, and so we have to be very mindful. So I'll start with our suppliers when it comes to doing business with them, and I'll keep it pretty high level, but it's a pretty extensive process, and Ria touched on this a little bit, that it sometimes does eliminate smaller businesses, but we have to keep this security first mindset in place. Because when it comes down to it, if you don't have the appropriate measures and controls in place to protect that data, that in turn is going to impact our organization, but more importantly, that impacts our customers and every single business that we do business with, and the data that we hold for them. And so it's extremely important to us as an organization that you have those controls. So we, you know, do questionnaires and risk assessments, but more importantly, it's also building that relationship and trying to get an understanding of, well, what is their mindset? What is their stance on security? Anytime you start to meet with businesses that have a lax approach to it, or they feel like, you know, it's not something that's top of mind for them, it's a red flag for us, because that to us symbols you don't take this seriously, and you don't have a choice today. You know, we're so reliant on technology in the spaces that we work. I mean, I don't know too many businesses today that don't use some aspect of technology. So it's extremely important to us that you have that same mindset that we do, and that we can be transparent with you, and that goes both ways. So we're asking you to list out all of these things that you do and what do you have in place, and letting us conduct this risk assessment. But we also have opened up the doors for our customers. We created what's called the cloud platform. And essentially what that does is it allows the suppliers that we work with to get a view and a snapshot of those security controls that we have in place to manage their data and to ensure that it's safe here with us at Equifax. So that's the supplier side to that. From an employee side, we've taken it a step further, right? We really embed this in your everyday life here at Equifax. You never know when you're going to get a phishing attack, and those are done internally by Equifax. We have a team that launches those sporadically, and And I think we get 3 or 4 of them a month at times. And then after that, we get this security snapshot that shows us, did you click on it? How long did it take you to respond? Did you report it at all? And just really tracking those behaviors. And then we take all of that data and we issue these reports, and those are used. The next step is that those are used with our annual reviews. We have requirements to attend trainings. We have requirements to participate in our monthly security awareness, but it's tied to your performance review. If you fail to complete a security training and you fail to, recognize when there's a phishing attack that's coming through, you can impact your bonus. It could impact your ability to essentially be promoted at the end of the year based on how you're graded, because we take it so seriously here. And it's the other piece to that is it's a top-down mentality. We have this buy-in all the way from our board of directors to our CEO. Our CEO, Mark Begor, he participates in annual security training, so nobody is exempt from that.
Wow.
And it's kind of fun in a sense that you get a little bit competitive. I was actually just talking to somebody yesterday that we were talking about our security snapshots that came in, and I had missed reporting one, and I was like, it sounds silly, but I had like this perfect score, and so I didn't click on it, but I didn't report it at the same time either. And so we get competitive with each other, and it's kind of created this fun environment. But those are just some of the things that we've implemented as within our organization for our employees, so that they understand how serious we take it. And if you don't take it as serious and it's not important to you, this is not the right place for you.
Wow. You just gave me some great ideas, and my team is like, oh my goodness. But we have an IT company, so I'll have to talk to you further about that, of how those test phishing expeditions, I'll call that, a play on word on the word phishing, happens, so that our team, because those are the things that we experience as well. So Ria, are there any ideas or anything you can share with us that the Federal Reserve Bank is doing with their employees?
Sure. So what's interesting is many of the things that Ashley spoke to, we either have or had in place. One of the shifts that we changed actually is really making it more as a people positive approach as opposed to a punitive approach. And we have really looked a lot to that, because the accountability piece that Ashley spoke to is really at the core of ensuring that employees are coming to work and recognize that each and every one of us have a role in protecting our infrastructure. So a couple things. One is, what was I going to say? We recognize that when people come in to the doors at the bank or into the doors on video, that they literally are still thinking about home, they're thinking about their kids, they're thinking about all these other things, even as they're working. That's human behavior. And so we asked ourselves, well, wait a minute, what are we actually trying to change here? We're really trying to influence human behavior, and in some cases, change bad habits. And so we recognize that the best way to do that, and quite frankly, it was working remotely that really brought it home for us, so that we could shape it in a way of, how is security personal to you? And so from the moment that the person has been brought into the door within the bank, first is just an onboarding process about what our cybersecurity posture looks like. I'm sure you can imagine that because of the institution that we are, that we have a lot as it relates to governance and data loss protection, how we send emails, how they're classified, all those types of things. So really just giving them a fundamental knowledge and overview without scaring them and making them nervous, and really asking themselves, is this the right place for me? But because it really does tend to, if people aren't familiar with it, it really tends to blow them away. And then then shortly thereafter, we start a very comprehensive training program to really delve into the whys, the impacts, what it could look like, and so on and so forth. Where we took that to, and then what does this mean to you? Not only what it means to you coming into the bank, but what does it mean to you when you're at home? And so home with your children, home when your kids are on sites, and so on and so forth. So it seems to really have changed. We're not quite there to suggest that there are complete pivot to this type of program is going to reduce the amount of susceptibility rates or failure rates to our phishing exercises, but all indicators suggest, at least initially, that some of the changes that we made are going well.
Wow. Both of you all, are touching on the fact of the accountability and the responsibility, when it does come, to the employees, and they have a role as well, in being able to ensure that their organizations are effective. And the question is, we practice these things at work, do we practice these same things at home? With the opportunity, especially the way things are today. So Ashley, this question I'm going to ask you is, I want to go to kind of data tracking in a sense, is, businesses, have always been able to measure, business development, basically through outreach, their revenues, through spend, marketing, through analytics. So, what are the ways that we track and measure, cybersecurity metrics, basically in a meaningful way, and being able to produce that information back to even the employee? You're on mute.
Let me get off mute. There we go.
There you go.
So I was saying that's a great question, and I really like the last piece of it, in a meaningful way. I think sometimes businesses and teams, I think we've all done it, right? Where you're sitting here tracking all of this, and then you look at it and you wonder, how is this helping the business? Like, am I just wasting my time with these metrics? And so from a cybersecurity perspective, and I won't go too deep into it because there are so many that you could utilize. But for us, what we found is the process that we've established is we all have our standard operating procedures. And within that, we've identified our roles and responsibilities and the key items that we have to do within our roles. And those are tied to SLAs and our KPIs. And we review those on a monthly basis from a security standpoint with our CISO, Jamil Farshi, to make sure that, what is going well and what's not going so well. Are there areas that we can improve upon? So just for an example, we do scans within our environment, or the mean time to respond to something that looks anomalous when we get alerts. So we have several companies that we work with. We have our internal processes, but we also have external companies that we utilize to ensure that every aspect of our business is being monitored. You may have read that over the last 4 years, we've spent $1.5 billion to transform our security posture, and that included in hiring 600 security employees. So we have this immense, population of people who are cybersecurity experts, and within that, they're tracking multiple things. But I would say that from the technical side, it's, mean time to respond to alert, and how long did it take you to acknowledge this, or how many false positives did we get when it comes to what's being triggered. From a business side, it's more along just what I spoke about earlier, in that security awareness and our phishing attacks that we do. I think that's probably the most successful that we have when we launch these phishing campaigns across the organization. But we're looking at the click rate, and we're looking at, how many people reported it versus didn't. And then we break that out by business unit, and we break that out by team, so that they can then have a deeper dive with their team. But the importance of that, and the reason we stress that so much, is one of the things that our CISO talks about a lot, is that Equifax has to be right 100% of the time. An attacker has to be right once. If they get that
Mhm.
one email through all of the layers that we have in place, and you click on that and malware is deployed into our environment, it's a very dangerous situation to be in, right? And luckily for us, even if that were to happen, there's layers upon layers upon layers of control. So we have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 opportunities to catch that as we start to see this anomalous behavior moving through our environment, that we can shut that down. But it's really just that knowledge and making sure that you adhere to the security policies that your organization has in place.
It makes me think of a saying, one bad apple doesn't spoil the whole bunch, but in cybersecurity, to your point, it does. And as if, the bad actors, that's what they want to test that statement, to say, oh yeah, no, we, do have control. We can take control of things. And again, I just think it is going to be important for us to measure and track in order to continue to figure out how we improve the system, the process, and hopefully give more bonuses and raises to those who have not been doing their job. Yeah, because you're right, there's a cost associated with everything. So Ria, now, even though we're probably in this hybrid environment after being almost 100% remote. I mean, because it depends upon, what company you work for, whether or not you were able to go into the office or you had to work remote. I think remote is still going to be a little more popular because success has occurred through all these things. So, what can employees do to protect, the company and themselves, while working at home? And we probably should have had this conversation 12 months ago, when all of this was starting. But still, as we go forward, we want to make sure, because people tend to get relaxed. I'm noticing that with masks. They think I'm vaccinated, so vaccinated, so I don't have to wear a mask. Well, I guess you still get COVID. I know of 2 cases already in that scenario. So, it's one of those things where we still going to have to protect each other. I think this is a way of life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if I came off mute, but I'm like, But before I answer your question, I this is in no way any level of endorsement, but having the pleasure of being on the panel with Ashley and knowing and following Equifax's story since 2017 and knowing some of the folks there, the investment that Equifax has made internally and in support of their customers, I think is just extraordinary from an ownership and an accountability perspective, and not shying away from really their responsibility for some of the things that have occurred. And I just think it's just a model, quite frankly, that other organizations that we're seeing are doing the same. So I say all that to say, when we think about our remote posture, and Raj, you're absolutely right. Even we as a bank, we have essential employees that are in the bank every single day, but many of us, myself included, have been working from home 100% since March. And now we're evaluating, what does that phased approach look like? And how do we make sure that we're continuing for our employees the awareness at home, and ensuring that when they go back to the bank, that because they feel like they have the safety of the infrastructure around them, that they don't lose the same level of vigilance that we hope to reinforce as they were at home. And so one of the things that we've been ensuring is, when we first went home to our remote home posture, we actually did have a remote work at home policy for security, inclusive of security, but not on a mass scale, not recognizing that everybody was going to be coming into the environment in a certain capacity. We don't have a lot of employees that live internationally. I mean, because that's who we are as an organization. We request that they work within the US, but we have a lot of global employees that when we went to the remote work home posture, they wanted to work from home in their countries. And so we had to ask ourselves, well, wait a minute, how do we make sure that we can keep the work moving forward, that we can protect our infrastructure, but make sure the employees are in the environment that helps them be as productive and as safe as possible. So it was reinforcing, making sure that the employees understood and continue to understand what our security policies look like and the expectations of them in working with us at the bank. The other thing that we have been very, very emphatic about is to ensure that no devices, so we limit and put high restrictions on employees' ability to be able to work on Federal Reserve work or contact anything on their personal devices. As a matter of fact, I would often say that it's, you know, almost 100% you are not supposed to do work on there will be an issue, a concern, a conversation if you are doing work on your personal devices. So making sure that all the work that you're doing is on the devices that were issued to you from your organization. That's what we are ensuring. The other aspect of that is we are emphatic about the fact that you must log in through a secure internet network. You must log in through that. If an employee, for some reason, didn't feel that they had that basic fundamentals in place, you know, we just requested and they had to make sure that they self-reported. What can we do to help you get what you need to do to make sure that your home environment is where it needs to be so that you can do the work. The other thing that we often reinforce is, again, making sure that you're logging into your VPN network, always logging in through VPN so that we can access what it is that we can do. We do have a lot of controls that actually make sure that if an employee from home tries to access something that they shouldn't through a certain mechanism, it's automatically blocked, it sends an alert, and it's either followed up on, but it doesn't necessarily stop or prohibit the employee to keep working, but it does flag so that we can make sure that it's not something that needs to be followed up on, reviewed on in a more extensive nature. And then, like I mentioned before, delaying, don't delay the updates. So we have a policy, you know, it's constant, hey, here's the update. I mean, it pops up on your screen. And then there's a time where literally you cannot work or keep moving forward if you have not processed those updates. And if for some reason someone tries to adapt a workaround, it's forced out to their machines remotely to ensure that the machines are protected. So.
Wow. You know, you made me think of one other, you know, I'll tell you just a real quick story. The IT company, when they were setting up our computer, I guess you can put certain restrictions on the internet, you know, especially people being able to go out and, you know, to different sites. Well, they had such restrictions. We had a WBE that had an intimate apparel company, and I tried to go out and look at her site and I couldn't do it. I couldn't even get into Victoria's Secrets. You know, it was, you know, website simply because of the fact of what category that came under. So I had them to loosen the strings just a little. I was like, I've got to be able to, you know, look at our WBEs and regardless of what industry they're in. So that helps. And the other was, we don't everyone have access to be able to add things to their computers. Right? So they're limited as to what they can add without a password or authorization, and only, you know, 2 people have those passwords in order, because now you have a checkpoint of what someone is adding. So they're not adding games or anything else, you know, to that software. So I really like the fact of issuance. But you brought up a point because there are a lot of corporations, believe it or not, companies that are allowing their employees to utilize their personal devices for work, which I always thought was a risk. You know, so I'm glad to hear you say that's really not a good idea. You know, it's just, that's an expense that you just have to add, you know, to your budget, you know, to ensure that you have all the protocols in place, you know, for your employees. So, which is great. And the firewall that you brought up. And I have this question for both of you, so let's talk about, crisis management, and cybersecurity, and it's almost impossible, like you say, to protect the business 100%, from the cyber attacks. But, is it possible for you to share, some of your crisis management steps to mitigate significant loss, to the financial status, a brand of the enterprise? And the reason I'm bringing this up too is, believe it or not, I've had conversations with our WBEs where one ransomware, of course, is what they experienced. One paid and one didn't. Neither of them got their information back. Whether they paid or not, they didn't get, their information back. So can you kind of share, some of the things that they can do, to kind of help mitigate that or ward off that, as well?
Sure, I can start with that. So one of the biggest things that we do here at Equifax, it goes back to that element of preparedness, and it's our crisis exercises. We execute with every single team. So all of our regional teams, we have 12 regional teams, and then we also have our executive leadership team and our board of directors. Every single one of those teams, including the executive team and board of directors, participates in annual crisis exercise. And what that means is we develop a scenario that is very specific and meaningful to the region in which they operate or the business in which they're in, whether it's mortgage services or verification. And we drill in with all of our subject matter experts on what can I do as I build out this scenario that is going to trigger a response from everybody on that team. It's not just the technical team. It's not just the cyber team. What can I, take down, or what scenario can I present that's going to spark that critical thinking across the board on how are you going to respond if we did have, an incident where somebody gained access to our system, unauthorized access. It doesn't just stop with security. They're only one component of that. We also have regulatory requirements, and we have to bring our legal team in. And what is that communication? And, from top down, what does our CEO believe on the stance should be on this? Our sales teams, if something's going on in the news and we've got a media issue, our call centers become inundated with calls from consumers that have questions. How quickly are we getting them that script to ensure that we have this uniform message? So when we create these exercises, they're really fun. I mean, they're engaging. We get amazing dialogue from each team, and you learn so much about all the different processes. I think Ria had said earlier that every day she's learning something new. And that is the same thing here at Equifax. We are such a major organization, and there's so many people that I'd even worked with, but I didn't truly understand what they did until we sat in this crisis exercise together. But just to kind of give you a scale of how many we do, in 2019, we conducted 19 exercises across the organization. 2020, even with the pandemic, we still met with our executive team and our board of directors. And then this year, to date, we've done 5, and we still have about 15 more on the calendar to complete before the end of the year. It's very important to us. Some of the conversations get a little spicy at times, but it helps us draw out, where the gaps are. And I always like to point out to people that gaps aren't necessarily a bad thing unless you don't do anything to fix it. So after every single exercise, we conduct our after actions report, and we have what we call lessons learned. But it's not just a matter of capturing them and checking the box and saying that, yes, we did this exercise this year, we're good to go. It's, well, how are we going to fix what isn't really working so well? And so then we track those through closure. Those are requirements for us, because at the end of the day, all of that makes us a stronger organization. So that for us is the key thing that we do. It is a constant practicing, testing every element from natural disasters to cyber attacks to insider threats, insider trading, whistleblowers. How are you going to respond? And I always like to get people out of this mindset, well, that's never going to happen to us, or we don't need to go through this exercise. Because in crisis management, I live in the world where the impossible is possible. So And I'm not doing my job if I don't get you to think, but what if it did happen, right? Who would have thought that we would be in the spot that we are today with the pandemic?
Right.
But here we are, and we've learned so much from it. But so many people were caught unprepared, and Equifax didn't have a perfect response, right? We have a lot of lessons learned, but I think that we were able to respond so quickly because of this muscle memory we had from the last several years. We knew how to create a task force and who were the key decision makers, and all of that ran very well. We are, obviously here in the office, our offices have stayed open. We took a different approach where 100% people were, shifted to go into that remote environment, but we also left our offices open, and we implemented every single possible protocol that you could imagine, from down to the number of square feet in each building, and doing the calculations on how many people can we have if they are spread apart, and getting all these to the plexiglass, because that work from home environment isn't conducive for everybody. So we wanted them to have that option. If you still wanted to come into the office, it is here for you. It is clean. It is safe. We bought masks for everybody. And now we're starting slowly to get in that process of where more and more people are coming back as they feel safe. They've been vaccinated. And it's great to kind of be in that collaborative mindset again. So those are really some of the things that we do, is what we focus on.
Ria, do you have any, a couple of comments to add to that?
Yes. I was just going to say, very similar within the bank, a lot of practice on exercises and testing the plans that we have in place. The other thing, though, that we're starting to think a little differently, and in full disclosure, I don't work as closely with that team here because of my role is a different, is a little different. But one of our philosophies, or my philosophies and others' philosophies, is around never let a good disaster go to waste. And what I mean by that, I want to be very clear. As long as it doesn't have an impact to life and safety, how do you use the current environment that you're working within or trying to respond to make sure that you're capturing real time the learnings and adapting so that you can build a more comprehensive response program moving forward. And so in some of the organizations or some of the clients that I worked with in the past, one of the things that we would recommend to them is, look, we're going to be responding to the community and everything else, but as part of that, we're actually going to be bringing a team in, and it wasn't the business continuity team that was helping, and disaster recovery team that was actually helping with the response and getting the organization or city or whatever back to where it needed to be. But we had a real-time after action review team that was independent from the response and the recovery team, that was literally thinking about talking to the business areas, how is this impacting you, what's going on, and then helping translate that to a change management strategy for the future of how they worked as a business and then how they responded as a business. So here at the Fed, one of the things that I know I've been asked, which is kind of weird to be in the opposite side of the table, where the crisis management team is coming to our department and asking us, what did you do and what did you do to that? Or what is your response to that, is the last piece of it. So you think you've put something in place to identify. You believe you have the controls in place to mitigate. You feel pretty strongly that you've done those tabletop exercises, as well as ensure that you have everything in place to respond. But have you really asked yourself what it's going to take to recover? Because at the end of the day, when the response is over, or as you're going through the response, really what you should be thinking about is, what does it mean to recover? Because you want to keep your small business moving forward. We want to reduce the amount that 60% of, or what did I say, 43% of small businesses that have to permanently close their business. So as large as the Fed is, we're not only doing it within the district, we're talking about these things holistically, because any district that is impacted is going to impact the system. Now, granted, we have a lot of controls in place to mitigate that, but that doesn't preclude us from having the responsibility to ensuring that we're looking at it holistically. So when I think about all of you that are on this call today, no matter what capacity that could look like for you. Not just thinking about some of the things that we have in place that Ashley spoke to and that I'm talking to relative to the Fed, but also think about what and how are you going to recover? You know, how are you going to keep making sure that your business is moving forward? And that hopefully will help your ability to be able to get back to that normal state, however you define it, as part of your business.
Wow. You know, so the takeaways that I heard, I mean, just, you know, I'm glad that was the last question because I'm just summing it up. I love the fact that gaps are not all bad. And the question is, what are you doing to close those gaps, you know? And so they become bad if you don't do anything about them, right? And then, you know, the other thing you said, I'm trying to, you know, I was trying to write real fast as Ashley was talking. You know, it's also, you know, build, you know, a more comprehensive, you know, response, you know, doing these things that you need to do. And then to Ria's point, that last one is always good, you know, is recovery. How are you going to recover? You're going through a crisis, you're trying to get through it. And yes, you're putting these things in place. And I'm going to add the word intent and impact. So where your intentions are one, you got to make sure the outcomes of those impacts are what you want, and getting those results that you need too. I know that we've had several questions within the chat, but my team is feeling that a lot of those questions were answered by the panelists, which means you all did a fantastic job, you know, of providing our audience great information about, you know, the subject of cybersecurity, crisis management, giving us a peek into the Federal Reserve as well as Equifax. And I agree with Ria in understanding, talking about recovery. Equifax is a perfect example of that, of showing what has been done and that's a model, you know, that we need to look at. And so I appreciate so much, you know, of you sharing with us. So, well, ladies and gentlemen, because of our sheroes and heroes that are on the call, we actually say, you know, our men that are involved in our organization are wonderful as well, because we appreciate the support that they give, you know, our women businesses, as well as call our He's for She's program. So we just want to let you know, you've heard from some great representatives of these two organizations, these great leaders of these organizations with the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta and Equifax. And so please give them a round of virtual applause. So you can put that hand up of that applause hand. So we really appreciate you all. And we want to thank both of you, Ria and Ashley, for taking so much time out of your busy schedule. We know how busy you all are, but you're walking the talk because you know that this information is also important to organizations such as the Greater Women's Business Council and our constituency for them to hear. And this is a great opportunity, you know, for them to connect with you and hear these things firsthand. So we really appreciate you being a part of our Power of Partnering marketplace today. And so we hope that the audience, hope you all took good copious notes, but if you didn't, guess what? We recorded this session. So we will be able to send this out to you, and so that you can then, you know, take some of those great suggestions and recommendations in order to be able to incorporate in your business. And more importantly, I say prepare you for the next normal. We don't say new normal anymore. We say next normal, because it's going to be a continuum of this. Because think about it, these are paradigm shifts, as was mentioned earlier. Who expected for us to be in a pandemic, right? So one of the things I want to share with you all is the fact that our next segment is going to begin at 10 a.m. and it is our matchmaking session. So if you have an opportunity, if you have an appointment, please log out of this session and log into the new Zoom link that you received in your email entitled Updated Zoom Link and Know Before You Go. And so for our women businesses, please remember that you will be placed in the GWBC waiting room until your appointment time. We are wishing you success. You know, thank you to all of you. It has been a pleasure being your moderator today. It's been a pleasure having this experience with Ria and Ashley as well. We really appreciate that. And I also want to thank the production team, because there's always the behind the scenes crew that makes things happen, you know, and that's Sherelle, Bert, Pat, Agar, Sharon Judge, Evelyn King, and Talisha Jackson, and who is our newest team member. So you'll be introduced to her later. And as well as our team from Evolutions Event Solutions, which is our event company, who is going to be helping to manage our matchmaker session that is next. And so on behalf of the Greater Women's Business Council, staff, board of directors, we want to encourage you to be safe, be healthy, and most importantly, be strong. Have a great morning, enjoy your week, and have a great holiday weekend too. Bye-bye.